Voters have rejected a regional mass transit system in the last 2 elections, but here it comes again. Will it be different this time without a major player going along? And the Detroit City Council sends a resounding no to Mayor Duggan on his request for a demolition bond. What now? Today is Sunday, November 24th, 2019, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. Good to have you with us as we head into such a big week every year in Detroit, as the parade will again do what it always does on Thanksgiving, and that's bring us together. And that is as important as ever after the impeachment hearings we've been through. It was another historic week in Washington, but we are going to set that aside this morning because it was also a very momentous week in Detroit. Sadly, the week included another name added to the ledger of brave Detroit police officers who've given their lives in the line of duty. 16 years of wearing the Detroit badge ended Wednesday night for Rasheen McClain, brought down by a gunman wielding a high-powered rifle. And our thoughts this morning are very much with the McClain family and with the larger family of blue that is hurting here in Detroit and police precincts everywhere. That was the same day we learned that the UAW was taking the corruption investigation into its own hands and bringing charges against now former President Gary Jones and Region 5 Director Vance Pearson. And as we were digesting that news, we learned General Motors was filing a jaw-dropping lawsuit against Chrysler Fiat alleging corrupt bargaining tactics, especially through the late Sergio Marchionne. That doesn't even include developments on our topics this morning on Flashpoint. First, Mayor Duggan was asking the City Council to let voters decide on a $250 million demolition bond to keep those empty and dilapidated houses coming down in the city. But with intense public focus on it, the Council shot it down 6-3. We're going to talk not only about that and what it means for demolitions, but whether it marks a change in the mayor-council relationship. And mass transit is back for another try, though this time without Macomb County. Is it right to keep asking for another bite of the apple? It's all this morning on Flashpoint. During the last several years, almost 20,000 dilapidated homes and buildings have been brought down in a Detroit overrun by blight. So an easy sell to knock down that many more, right? Well, not exactly. City Council voted down the mayor's push for a demolition bond, and we see really the first fissure between the council and the mayor's office in some time. Let's talk about that and more with Stephen Henderson, back with us from Detroit Today on WDET. Kat Stafford is back with us. She's the government watchdog reporter for the Detroit Free Press. Former City Council member Sheila Cockrell is here, and so is Arthur Jemison, who heads up services and infrastructure for the city of Detroit, which means, Arthur, this entire matter of dilapidated homes is kind of right in your lane. Where do we go from here? What we have until, I guess, late in the day tomorrow for somebody on council to change their mind and want it reconsidered. Is that likely?
I've heard both that people are talking about it and also that they're not. I think what we're planning to do is to, focus and develop more specifics about the reforms we need to undertake as it pertains to the execution of demolition. We've also been spending a lot of time with council talking about the rehabilitation of housing and how we can prioritize that. Also ways that we can get the public and others involved in review and make sure there's a lot of public scrutiny on the work that we do. So we came up with, I think, a great resolution, and we're going to keep implementing it.
We saw a crazy public turnout for the hearing just before the vote, and I think we also heard a fair amount of skepticism because of some of the starts and stops and problems that the demolition program had early on, and I think this becomes a matter of trust and whether or not you've got this figured out now so that there's no more grand jury investigations that are going to pop up around this matter.
So our plan and has always been, as part of this demolition bond, to begin a reform effort with the way we do demolition. Our resolution brought demolition back in as a department in the city so that council would have a chance to do the oversight that they do. We also had a demolition review board that was going to get public folks involved in reviewing the actions of demolition. We also had goals about rehabilitation and really prioritizing Detroit-based businesses as the people doing the work. So we had a great sort of resolution going. In the end, I think people wanted more to be added to that, and we're planning to do that. But over the next, 30 to 60 days, we've got 3 or 4 work streams going that are going to result in us beginning to execute that reform agenda.
Kat, where do you suppose the real pushback on this is coming? Is it about the money? Is it about the way of doing it with a bond? Is it about
suspicions about the way the work's already been done? What's going on?
I think what you saw over the course of this past week, and really since when the administration first brought this forward, were a lot of questions about transparency, accountability, and the way that the program has been handled in the past. And the very day that they were set to vote on this bond, you had the city's ombudsman come forward and really reveal yet another concern about the program. So I think a lot of the council members that I've spoken with, it's not a matter of do we want the houses to come down. I think everyone agrees that they do want the houses to come down, but a lot of folks really want to see a lot of these parameters in place before the bond gets on the ballot.
This is interesting, Sheila. It's really the first, as I mentioned, the first divide we've seen. This has been a very harmonious relationship so far between the council and the mayor. Is that changing at all?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's not unusual for there to be divisions between mayors and councils.
In Detroit? Are you
Yes,
kidding?
right. So first of all, I mean, I was not surprised. I think the perception of harmony has been good for the city, but I think it's been not quite as deep and intense as the narrative has provided. I was on a council for 16 years. I can remember the number of times council voted something down, and the following week or 4 or 5 weeks later, boom, the 5 becomes a 6 or the 4 becomes a 5. So that's just how politics and public policy intersect at a local level of government. So I don't think too much should be made of this division. Certainly there's bridge building and bridge mending that always needs to be done. That's part of why you have an administrative staff on the 11th floor in this case, and on the 13th floor to kind of keep things going. So I think we shouldn't make too much of the trust.
There's a lot of different kinds of division that can develop, Stephen. Some of them are over policy. Some of them are over upcoming elections. And I understood that there were a number of people last week who were being polled in the city of Detroit asking if they would prefer Mayor Duggan or Mary Sheffield for mayor. So there's some polling going on. Yeah. Is that playing into any of this at all?
It may be. I mean, certainly there's posturing, right? Political posturing going on both sides and on the council. I got to say, I'm proud of council for standing up and saying, hey, we have questions. We want them answered. They have every right to do that, and that's what we send them there to do. I have to say, though, that I can't view this through any other lens than through that of the neighborhood where I was born here in Detroit, where I operate a small nonprofit that's trying to make the neighborhood better. On our block, we have 14 abandoned houses. We were not eligible for demolition under the old money, the federal money that was here. This $250 million is the only hope that we would have had to get rid of those houses. And you could not go up and down our block and talk to anybody who would say we shouldn't take those houses down. At the same time, they watch the news, they see what's going on, they have questions about transparency, fairness, they have questions about debt for the city, and of course we have lots of other things in our neighborhood that need doing. I mean, it's people's lives that are in the most desperate need in Detroit, and tearing down houses isn't really fixing those issues. And I think we have a problem in the city of thinking that every solution we come up with has to solve everything. But it's still something we got to think
take
about.
a whack at that.
Well, I appreciate you bringing the conversation back to where it belongs, which are there are people who are going to drive home tonight and they're going to park their house next to a vacant or abandoned house. And no matter what they do about the condition of their house, they may not be able to get insurance for their house because of that vacant house. So as long as that it remains at the center of the discussion and we're talking about how to do that better, I think we're going to continue to have the kind of partnership that we've enjoyed with council. And I think we got to keep bringing the conversation back there, because the more people talk about, well, what about this political consideration or this other one? I think as long as the issues about reform, improvement of the process, value for the citizens, and their ROI for the investment we're making, I think that we're going to come to a great place and begin to implement the improvements that are needed.
I just think that, Kat, if you're living next to this house that just came down, I don't know how much, when it finally, you've been waiting for years for it to come down, it's finally gone. I wonder how much you think about, if you're worried about transparency or about who got the contract. You just know that your neighborhood got better.
I think that's a great point. First of all, as a native Detroiter, I grew up next to a house that was blighted, so I know that personally what it's like to live next to an abandoned home, to see your neighborhood change so quickly over time.
Yeah.
That's damaging. But at the same time, a lot of the tips that I've received, a lot of the concerns that I've reported on over this past year have really been driven by residents as well. So while, yes, I think everyone, again, wants the blight removed, they want to see it come down, I don't think it's fair to assert that the only people that are raising concerns about this are the politicians. I do believe residents also have concern about transparency and making sure that the program is really run well.
Yeah.
So,
Sheila, this always feels like it comes with the territory. When you're talking about construction and contracts, and there just seems to be an unseemly part of it that always develops around it, and suspicions that it's not being done on the up and up, and there's a friends and family plan to it, all of that. Is there any way to do this cleanly?
Well, I think one of the issues is that for, I don't know, at least a generation, the city of Detroit has never had enough positions to do all the level of work that needs to get done at this really like micro level. I mean, there's only so many inspectors that you can hire, and they got to inspect 42 different things. Yeah. So there's some structural problems that are the result of literally the 50 years of disinvestment that we've all lived through that culminated in bankruptcy, and we're coming back from now. But I also think, and this to me, I was paying sort of general attention to it, and then as it became more, I started calling, okay, what's going on here? And frankly, the framework that I started to hear more about was this resolution that was being proposed, this group, the 21, I forget the name of it, organizations who the city was interacting with, and literally, I think it's incredible to link demolition with rehabilitation in a way using dollars that don't have all the restrictions that come with federal or state money. So to me, this is where we need to get the conversation back to, but I agree transparency is huge and needs to be part of the picture.
Devin, I was just going to add, I had a chance to write something this week, which is unusual for me, to just talk about how important it is, $250 million investment in the neighborhoods of the city, places that we have not yet been able to take action. I mean, in just about every one of the neighborhoods that's very severely distressed in the city, demolition and rehab together, and being able to take down some houses, then rehabilitate others, and extend the power of planning, not just to the areas that are strongest, is something that the resolution was going to allow. And it also mentioned that, Indian Village or West Village, in the last administration, they're talking about doing demolitions there. Can this neighborhood come back? Now everybody knows how that neighborhood can come back. It's come back incredibly strongly. So the ability to do that, it really starts with demo and ends with something like a strategic neighborhood fund announcement or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't use the word blight over on our block because it dissociates it from people and their lives. Our problem in Detroit is about people. We don't invest enough in our people, making sure they have opportunity and all the things that they need. That's the focus, and that's where I think the conversation has to focus, even as you talk about the need to take down houses. Yeah.
Great conversation, gang. Thanks so much for being here. Have a happy Thanksgiving this week. When we come back, mass transit, back for another try. This is Flashpoint, our local report.
It's a repeat of a sellout at Gorman's. Due to tremendous response, Gorman's is bringing back the sale of the year on all leather furniture. This is your last chance to save up to 60% on the best leather brands now at Gorman's.
It's Black Friday all month long at Gowling Toyota in Warren. Purchase any new vehicle in stock and receive a $200 Visa gift card. Right now, lease the 2019 RAV4 LE for as low as $199 a month. Get to the all-new Gowling Toyota in Warren today.
Forgotten Harvest is a lifesaver for a mother like myself with children and having so many snacks and lunches to make.
The food from Forgotten Harvest make me feel better in school.
Because these children around this community really look for Forgotten Harvest. And I thank Forgotten Harvest for helping me and my family out. Forgotten Harvest needs your support to help families in need.
We need your help today.
Is your house cold and drafty? Are your energy bills through the roof? With Michigan's winter being so unpredictable, you cannot afford not to insulate your home another winter. Stop bleeding money. Insulate your walls and attic. Cut your energy bill up to 50% with Ace & Sons.
It's a repeat of a sellout at Gorman's. Due to tremendous response, Gorman's is bringing back the sale of the year on all leather furniture. This is your last chance to save up to 60% on the best leather brands now at Gorman's.
The Help Me Hank toy test is back with a twist. Do kids really know what should go on their list? Or do parents know what brings fun that will last? And which toys get boring incredibly fast? It's Parents versus Kids, Monday at 5.
Why do you like this toy?
Because they're surprises.
And let me tell you, Hank's really surprised.
We could not believe what they really wanted this year.
Watch the Help Me Hank toy test for holiday cheer. Monday on Local 4 News at 5.
Welcome back. I don't know how many conversations we've hosted on Flashpoint about regional transit. It has been a study in frustration for its supporters, but the issue is back again, and this time in a new iteration and, quite consequentially, a new leader in Oakland County. But does it change the fundamental disagreements that have kept it from happening? Let's talk about it with the chair of the Board of Commissioners of Washtenaw County, Jason Morgan, is here, the Chief Deputy Executive of Oakland County, Hillary Chambers, and the Assistant Wayne County Executive, Khalil Rahal. Thank you all very much for being here. Hey, Hillary, I want to start with you, because along with the fact that there's nobody here from Macomb County, which is a change from the way this has been approached before, the change in leadership I mentioned in Oakland County does make this different this time around, but will it make it different to voters?
We hope it will, and you know, County Executive Coulter has said he's not interested in just dusting off the old plans. He really wants to take the time to develop a new plan that really works for all of Oakland County. And so what we're talking about is an approach that's more flexible, that involves our Board of Commissioners, which I think is a good thing because we'll be able to develop a more grassroots, bottom-up type of plan. And I think when we put that before the voters, it'll have a much better chance of success.
In the past, we saw both Brooks Patterson and Mark Hackle kind of said that they were trying to be agnostic and stay out of it if it was up to voters, and yet that wasn't enough. What were the shortcomings? What has been the pushback, other than this sense, especially by Oakland County, that they were somehow going to be a donor county to this and not get much out of it?
I think it's all about the value that people feel in the plan, and that can be seen in two aspects. The value in terms of themselves and their community, and then I think people have to be asked if there's value for the region. And I hope that when we make that case to them, they'll see that if we can really move our region forward in this way, it's going to help economic development. It's going to help keep our kids here because they want to live in areas where there's mobility and walkability. And so I think it's got to be both of those things. It's got to be value for the individual communities and value at large for all of us.
Khalil, it hasn't been hard at all to get Detroit to sign on to this idea. We're talking a lot about Detroiters trying to get to jobs back and forth. What feels different to you about this time?
Yeah, I think Hillary hit it on the head. I think there's a much more public awareness about what regional transit can do to folks. And I think we have to do as a government a better job of explaining the benefits that even if you don't take public transportation, what that can do for you. You know, it can lower your auto insurance, it can lower your health care insurance, it can result in less accidents and less death, it can lower emissions, it can get people to jobs and education and medication and all the things that we need. We always say, for every dollar you put into public transit, you get $4 back into the economy. Some of those dollars come into cost savings for people. And I think as government, right, we could always do a better job, but the awareness of it over the last couple of years has grown dramatically.
I think the calculation usually, though, seems to be when it comes to mass transit that it never fully pays for itself. You have to agree that it's a societal good, but you're going to try and make the argument that financially it does pay for itself?
Absolutely, and every metropolitan area really in the world has made the case. You know, if you look at your New Yorks and your Chicagos and your Los Angeles and your Miamis, but I don't even say we have to compare ourselves to them. Cleveland, St. Louis, Minneapolis, Phoenix, Portland, smaller metropolitan areas are seeing the benefits of investing into public transportation. I think we got to do the same.
Jason, we seem to be the example, though, to the whole world, though, that we love our cars. That's been the argument forever, that we're just not all that interested in riding with a bunch of other people or sort of traveling en masse anywhere. Do we need a societal change, or is that one already happening with the way that, for instance, younger voters think about it?
I mean, I think the societal change is absolutely happening. We see a lot of young people who are moving out of our region because we don't have public transportation. We see jobs leaving our region because we don't have public transportation. It's not something we have to force or push on anyone. It's just naturally happening. It is extremely important that we improve the access to public transportation, not only about the things that Hillary and Khalil are saying, but it impacts our economy, the environment, our public health. It impacts a whole range of things. It impacts the affordability of our community. We have huge challenges in terms of affordable housing in Ann Arbor, in Detroit, in other areas, urban areas of the region. This helps all of those things. It benefits a wide range of things for our communities.
The inclusion of Washtenaw County shows a clear regional idea and approach to this. How much does it hurt then not to have Macomb County involved at the table?
I mean, quite frankly, Washtenaw County has been ready for regional transit for several years. We have been fully committed, and we've been even open to a direct partnership just with Wayne County if we weren't able to develop something with a 4-county region. But I think we've seen a huge change in leadership now, not only with executive culture, but also with the Board of Commissioners in Oakland County, the new board chair in Wayne County. We have new leaders across the board, along with the consistent and steady leadership of Wayne County and the mayor of Detroit. We've had really great folks at the table, and I think now we have a whole new opportunity to make that happen.
And if I can say something about Macomb, because Macomb County is an important part of our region, and Executive Hackle is an important leader. And I think what's good about the Municipal Partnership Act that we're asking the legislature to amend so that we can use it in this instance is right now they have a countywide system with the SMART program. That's different in Oakland, right? We have opt-out communities. So Macomb County is countywide. And they've decided that right now they're satisfied with their level of service. If they change that decision in a few years, this allows them to join at a later date. So we're optimistic that we can take this first step, and then they can make a decision about joining.
And we would love for Macomb County to be in, but if they aren't willing to be in it at this point, we would love for them to consider joining later. And in the meantime, the parties who are willing, those of us here who've been ready to partner for a while, we'll move forward because I think our residents are ready for public transit. They're ready for regional transit.
But you go in hoping that Macomb becomes a part of it rather than being, I guess, petulant about it and going, well, forget you, we'll just move on without you, and tough, you lose out.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've said it accurately. If Mr. Hackle calls up my boss, her boss, Jason, and says, hey, we want to reconsider this, we want to be in, we will welcome them with open arms. In the meantime, I don't think any of us can afford to wait, right? Because we've seen, one of my jobs as the Economic Development Director of the county is to help attract businesses and corporations to Wayne County to help the better part of life, right? And so we've been on calls and talked to manufacturers around the world that have asked us point blank, what does your public transportation look like? And the lack of that always hurts us when we're trying to compete with other states for those bids.
Just got a little time left, but I want to make sure that we get past just the structure of how this would come together and whether or not there's support for it to get to what does it look like? Hillary, what does this plan then end up being? What is regional transit going to look like inside?
Well, that's the hard work that's ahead of us that we're committed to doing, because what we're going to be doing now as we're pursuing this legislation is really getting out there in the community and having these conversations and developing the plan over the next 2 months. It's not going to be a top-down approach. We're all going to get out there and talk to our communities and figure out what their needs are and listen to them and get input so that we can develop that plan. And I think the one thing that we all have found is we've had success. If you look at SMART's fast service on Woodward Avenue and the other arteries, I mean, in a year and a half, it's grown by 90%. So when there is good service, people utilize it. And so, we're looking at developing those types of really efficient, high-tech services.
I think sometimes it's hard to get people excited about a bus, but is there a more futuristic piece to all this that you want to see?
There are several pieces to it. Looking at potential rail between Ann Arbor and Detroit, looking at more innovative services that involve Lyft and Uber, really being responsive. I think this plan will continue to be shaped and developed over time as new technology is available, and that's what we're committed to.
I think the plan will have buses, and there's no doubt about that, but it won't be the kind of buses you see today. They will be buses with Wi-Fi, there will be buses with dedicated lanes and signal priorities. It will be more like a train on wheels, and I think more people are going to be accepting of a lot of those ideas.
All right, next 2 months, we'll say a lot about how it all looks then. Thank you all very much for being here. We've obviously got a lot more to talk about as we head toward the election a little less than a year from now. We'll wrap things up on Flashpoint right after this. Don't go away.
Always there for you. Come experience the Gowling difference at Gowling Alfa Romeo of Birmingham.
During the Season of Speed event, lease the 2019 Alfa Romeo Giulia with all-wheel drive for just $309 a month with sign and drive. Or lease the 2019 Alfa Romeo Stelvio with all-wheel drive for as low as $349 a month with sign and drive. Don't wait. Hurry into Gowling Alfa Romeo of Birmingham today on Woodward, just south of Maple, and at alfaromeoofbirmingham.com.
Right now, buy a high-efficiency furnace and get AC free. Installed with payments as low as $52 a month. Call today.
Go with the name you know. Fantastic, fantastic.
Delta Dental of Michigan is building brighter futures in Metro Detroit by supporting teachers, by investing in neighborhoods, by giving back day in and day out so we can all enjoy healthy, smart, vibrant communities. Learn about Delta Dental of Michigan and the work we're doing in your neighborhood at deltadentalmi.com.
It's Black Friday all month long at Gowling Toyota in Warren. Purchase any new vehicle in stock and receive a $200 Visa gift card. Right now, lease the 2019 RAV4 LE for as low as $199 a month. Get to the all-new Gowling Toyota in Warren today.
Our weather guys have always worked to keep you safe. Now our weather app brings them to you live.
Hey, Michelle, it's me, Ben Bailey. Hey, good-looking orange. You better head to the checkout. Rain is headed this way, and the roads are going to get slick. Drive safe.
Well, not that live. Download the new Local Forecasters app, now with live updates from your favorite weather guys. Faster, easier, accurate, free. Weather in a flash.
Before we go, a reminder I doubt you need. Such a big week ahead for the city. America's Thanksgiving Parade coming down Woodward Avenue on Thursday morning. One way or the other, I want you to be with us. Come see it in person or join us for our annual broadcast. We'll set the stage during Local 4 News today, and then at 9 we got our celebration underway. Or you can watch from anywhere in the world online at clickondetroit.com. We will see you then. Meet the Press is next, right after Mitch Albom's Heart of Detroit.